Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi guys, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here today. We are going to be talking to Slesha Patel, and she is from Kansas City, and she's also a world traveling model. And she is going to be talking to us about how to teach our daughters about beauty. I think this is such an important topic because it is ever evolving, and this as a parent can be very hard. With that, let's get to Slesha.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited that you're here today. So let's kind of start with who you are and a little bit about yourself. Can you give us a little summary of where you come from?
Yeah, for sure. So I was born and brought up in Kansas, but ethnically, out of my 4 grandparents, 2 of them are Indian, one of them is Burmese, and one of them is Kenyan. So I always joke that I'm a little bit spicy. I would say my journey has been a series of unplanned events. Like I wouldn't call them unfortunate, but they were definitely unplanned events. I was one of those kids that just like loved to try everything. I was always fascinated by different things. And I would say that like my journey in life has been very similar. So like after high school, when I went to college, I studied medicine. I was in like a direct medical program with a little bit of like undergrad at the beginning of that. I took a break to study healthcare administration. I worked in healthcare administration for like a minute, and then I got called to work in fashion. So I worked in fashion in New York City for a little bit. And then now I'm like a full-time model. And I always say like, I don't know what I'm going to be next. Just because my life has been so volatile so far. But I think it's been really fun to like not have a 5-year plan and to sort of just like take life as it comes, because so many of the things that have happened to me, like just mentally and just where I've been physically, it's just been like kind of a fun journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so tell us, like you're a model, and so you're directly seeing what beauty is looking like. What do you think beauty means in 2024?
I feel like as a model, I do get to see pretty much every type of human possible, all sorts of gender expressions, heights, body shapes, age. And I think like just that has really expanded my own personal perspective of beauty a lot. And I think that just from seeing all these different types of people that are in this industry, I think that like beauty, especially in 2024, is just like self-acceptance, self-love, and just like really learning to appreciate your uniqueness. Because like while there are some people that might have similar features, broadly everyone really does have like this whole like unique what they bring to the table sort of thing. And that's ultimately what drives success in my field.
Yeah. I mean, and especially when we're thinking about teens, like this idea of self-love, self-acceptance is so big, but as a society, it's a really big deal. But thinking about our teenage daughters and raising girls to become women and accepting ourselves, that would be so huge. So I'm excited about this transition kind of in the scheme of what beauty is looking like. So how do you think we can encourage our daughters to embrace their own beauty and understand what determines how we all look?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. I think like I went through a lot of exploration during the pandemic specifically about this because I was really questioning everything about my existence and my reality through my own mental struggles. And I realized that how we look is shaped so specifically by genetics and our ancestry. And if I go back to what I studied in college and like biology, it really tells us that like the most viable reproduce and the best traits are passed on. So the way that I realized is like I found comfort in my own beauty is that like each individual person looks the way they do for a reason, and your ancestors were successful, they survived, like pass on these amazing traits. And so I feel like each one of us is the best parts of all of our ancestors, which is such a cool thing to like feel and embody and just like find a new way of embracing your beauty. It's like the way that your eyes are, the way that your eyebrows are, even like the way, like the shape and size of your nostrils, like all of that is so specific and hereditary to like where like your ancestors lived and how much airflow was coming in through their noses. And so I think like really like it's really, really cool to think about the way you look in reference to those things.
That's amazing. Like that's totally a perspective that I've never taken before to think about how those things were like selected,
Yeah.
like survival of the fittest, right? Like to have the most successful survive. So that makes sense. And then to think about beauty in terms of both survival, but then also like the ability to reproduce. Cause it's like, if we looked at like animals, for instance, it's like the peacocks with the most beautiful tail feathers, right? Are the ones that we go to, right? But it's like, or that other peacocks, the females are going to. And so like then they're reproducing and making more peacocks that kind of look like that. So humans, it's the same that there's like an attractive part, even if we're not feeling like we
Yeah.
love a certain part of ourselves, there's like a reason why that genetic feature has continued to present. What a unique perspective. I love that. So
Yeah.
how did you get to that idea? Like what brought you to that place of like thinking about the genetic piece of this?
There were specific features about myself on social media that kind of went again like traditional against like beauty standards. And so when I was looking at these like, features, I'm like, well, I don't have that. I have this. And I'm like, wait, I get that from my mom, or I get that from my dad, or I look a little bit boyish because I look exactly like my grandpa. I like stumbled across like a picture of him when he was in his 20s. And so I saw myself with just like, a boy haircut essentially. And so like, and I love those people in my family. I love my mom. I love my dad. I love my grandpa. And so when I saw those things and put those things together, I'm like, they're worthy of love. So maybe I am too.
Mhm.
They loved the way they looked and what the way they looked was successful for them. And so maybe I can find that in myself too.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about the social media part because I think that it is so hard for teenagers, especially to see reality in social media of like, it isn't reality, right? A lot of
Oh,
times it
yeah.
is so skewed. What do
Yes.
you think about that zone of things, like thinking about social media and how it's impacting our teens, especially just because they're the ones who are most on it, but their mental health and their version of like what beauty is.
I think like you have to go into it with like a little bit of mental toughness, but also like knowing that you have the power with your own social media. And so muting people that kind of make you feel some type of way about yourself, like if you're not feeling good when you look at their content, mute them or unfollow them.
Hmm.
And then try to find more pages that you can relate to that get you more excited, that make you feel better about yourself. I think that a lot of times we don't realize that we have so much power over our algorithms and what we're seeing on our like For You page, and even on our home feed. And I think that like started out kind of where everyone else did, like where like successful accounts were being fed to me. And over time, I started to train my social media to like understand that like seeing this specific type of content really hurts me. And
Hmm.
it makes me feel insecure about certain features that I have. And then I actually went and used hashtags to kind of seek out other creators that were putting out things that I could resonate with more and made me feel a little bit better about myself. I think the way I see it is like the more you see something, the more you find the beauty in it and the more you start
Hmm.
to like it. And so if there's some feature that you don't like about yourself, like I know that one of my friends she's a content creator and she focuses on two-toned lips. A lot of girls like don't like that they have perhaps two-toned lips. One lip is like very dark compared to the other. And so she has like this whole page that she's like, oh, on my two-toned lips, this is like, the lip combo that I use and I love it. And she just kind of posts content surrounding that, all the good, bad, and ugly. And like, you just like by the end of it, you're like, wow, I want two-toned lips, even if you don't have them to begin with. And
Hmm.
so I think like any like feature that you have that maybe you're not like resonating with on yourself, like if you start to follow those types of accounts, you will grow to find love in it too.
Yeah, that's great advice. Especially like I think for parents, sometimes our teens especially are on content and we're not like watching it with them, right? Because they're
Oh
doing it
gosh. Yeah.
independently, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's like also maybe taking a minute to like, as a parent, to find content, right? Like to talk to your teenage daughter about like what areas they're feeling insecure about, or working together to find hashtags that help them to find creators. Cause I think eliminating social media isn't a super great option. I mean, I would love it, right? In some ways, right? There's a
Right.
lot of things that come from that are not great. But I
Mhm.
think I'm not sure that totally eliminating it is the best next step, but finding it to make it so it's productive and healthy for you. I love that
Yeah,
concept of that.
totally agree. I think
Um,
we're in an era
sorry.
where like environmentally, like the kids of today, the teenagers of today, the grade school students of today, they can't really evade social media because it's such a part of their culture, their environment. It's like what kids are talking about. I think like for my parents' generation, this is the new modern way of mouth, like word of mouth type thing. Like everybody knows everything because of social media. And so I
Hmm.
think about finding a way for it to work for you and not against you is really, really critical.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, so how can you talk about beauty and the standards around the world being very variable? Like, can you talk about like, I know that in the United States we have like a version of like what people consider beautiful, right? But then we have so many other countries around the world, and beauty is not the same in each country. And I think this is such a fascinating thing. So can you talk about what you know about the variance of beauty in different countries?
Yeah, for sure. So of course, I'm 50% Indian, so goes to India. In India, they love big eyes. And so if you have really, really big eyes, like, the bigger the better, honestly. Like even if they're bugging out, like they love big eyes. I have a friend who's Chinese and she used to always tell me that they loved small feet out there. And foot size is not something I think in the US that we really think about. Like you just go to the store and you buy your shoes and it's not like, oh, like, there's a meaningful difference between like a size 7 shoe and a size 10 shoe. Like people aren't like, this is better or worse, right?
Hmm.
But there, they really love small feet. Um, I'm part African. I know that in Africa, there's like a community that loves long necks, and there's a different one that loves really long earlobes. So they put really long gauges inside their ears to kind of drag out their earlobes. And so I
Hmm.
think like all of these communities, all of these different cultures have different beauty features they love. I think even within the US, you could look back 100 years. In the 1920s, what was kind of favored as like the beauty standard is almost the exact opposite of what we have today. So like today, I think like, a slightly upturned angle of the eye, like a cat eye is really favorable. You see a lot of makeup trends, like having like, eyeliner in this cat-like way that it kind of up tilts your eye. In the 1920s, they actually wanted downturned eyes. And then like they wanted really thin lips. Right now, there's everybody's getting lip filler, like in the celebrity Hollywood world. So it's actually like very like every down to every single feature, the fullness of the face versus like removal of buccal fat and like kind of like really like snatching your face back. Like it's like literally the direct opposite. So I always think it's really interesting to think about what may happen in 100 years. What will like, my great grandchildren, so to speak, like be favoring then?
Hmm.
What is society looking like then? What are all the celebrities going to be doing then? Because it really has changed drastically.
Yeah. Well, and that's fascinating because so if we pull it back to the genetic part, right? Genetics, I mean, that's not something that changes quickly, right?
Yes.
In terms of how we're adapting. And so if you think about like the generation, so even in 100 years, we may only have a few generations that have been developed. So like, let's say with three
Mhm.
generations, it's like we're still pulling on what we wanted 100 years ago and how we look now. And that's not something that quickly changes. So it's also in the past, right? So that's an
But actually,
interesting
that's such an
pers-
interesting point. And that's why I always say that, like, where you can find the most peace in the way you look is the way that you were born naturally, because all these things are changing. So there's no right or wrong answer with the way that you look. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's just like you have to love the way that you are because you are the way that you are for a reason, and what's favored is going to change anyway. So the only thing that's
Mhm.
timeless is you in its essence.
Yeah, I love that. So, I mean, how do we help our kids or teens to like think about these beauty standards and that they're ever evolving? Like, how do we help them to come to peace? Like, makeup trends change. Like, I mean, sometimes like, things that are more like having full lips versus thin lips. And I mean, those things can be body modifications, right? And
Yes.
so it's like sometimes that can be such a big choice. And I think everybody has to make their own choice. But ultimately, the reason why we're doing that is to feel more okay with ourselves. But
Yeah.
how do we help our teens to be okay with who they are and to be following these trends and trying to find beauty in that?
I think that if we all met the beauty standards, we'd all look the exact same or we'd all be like robots. And I think that like one really easy way of thinking about it is if you asked a classroom, what is your favorite color? Everyone would have a slightly different answer. There may be more popular color choices. Like, I don't know that anybody's saying like beige is their favorite color, but like, I think that like there will be some like, oh, there'll probably be a handful of blues and maybe there'll be a handful of pinks and reds and greens and certain specific colors. But I think in the same way that we don't all like the same color, if we go to a restaurant together, we're not all going to order the same menu item. I think that we all like different things and we're all drawn to different things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in the same way, we don't all see beauty the same way. And I actually think that's what makes humanity really beautiful. And I think there is like, I mean, a really plain, very easy way of saying it. I think what's beautiful to one is maybe ugly to another. And so it's possible that like a boy that you think is super cute, everyone else is like, I don't get it. Even with dogs, like you could see a dog on the street and some people like big dogs, some people like small dogs, some people like
Mm-hmm.
really furry dogs, some people like the like, Frenchies with the cute little wrinkles and stuff. Everybody likes something a little bit different. And so just understanding that as a baseline that you can't be, no one, no singular person can be the most beautiful
Mm-hmm.
and the most anything is, I think, really like peaceful. Like it's, I think like sometimes we have such a competitive culture, especially like in school, like with sports and there's awards and there's grades given out by teachers. Like it kind of promotes us being a little bit more competitive with each other, but understanding that you're just like kind of in your own lane and your own little pathway,
Mm-hmm.
I think helps a lot.
Yeah.
It's really
So
hard to get out of that structure that we've built.
yeah, like to be, I like that we're only like really competing against ourselves, but maybe not even competing, but just like trying to find our version that we like best about ourselves, but
Yes.
about taking into account the features we already have and like what makes us feel good versus like what society says we
Mhm.
should feel good about. That's hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's a really tough lesson. I think that's why like self-love to me is so journey based. Beauty is so journey based because also we change as we age. Like every single day, like you are actively changing. Like your telomerase is getting shorter and shorter. And I'm jumping really deep into the biology here, but like we are actively changing every single day. Like what you looked like yesterday, although it's very similar to today, it is
Mhm.
different.
Yeah.
And so learning to embrace yourself through all the stages becomes incredibly complicated. I have a few friends that have had children and they've really struggled to like love themselves now as a mom.
Hmm. Yeah. Our bodies change
Their
for
bodies change.
sure.
Yeah. So it's
Absolutely. And
about like,
our brains change. Yeah.
yeah, everything changes. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it's about like loving the journey, loving the foundation of what you were born with, and loving the potential of that growth.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's hard because I don't think our society is there yet, but we can start this in our own homes, right? With
Yes.
our own kids and changing that narrative, which I
Mhm.
think is so powerful. So we're talking about the ways that our daughters we can help them kind of embrace self-love. What do you think we might be doing that we don't realize might actually be hurting our teenage daughters?
Absolutely. I think, oh gosh, this is a huge one. There's so many different directions I could go with this one, but the one that comes to mind right now, because it's the most relevant in my personal life, is like associating healthy with body shape. And
Mhm.
this is something that I've been seeing a lot in my own life. Like I had a really good friend growing up, um, and her parents were both very, very slender. And she was actually just like, I think like her actual bone structure is possibly just wider set. And so like she would probably never be a size zero. But the truth is like she ate better than anyone I knew. She ate super clean, never really had junk food. She was also the most athletic person I knew. Like when it came to sports, like she was always crushing it. If you touched her like leg or something, straight muscle. And she was just so fit and so healthy. But her mom would constantly be like, you need to lose weight. You need to lose weight. I'm like, this girl, I don't think can lose weight. Like she's pretty much all muscle. Like she's amazing. And
Hmm.
then on the contrary, on the flip side of that, I had a lot of other people's moms. My parents never put this on me, but other people's moms would be like, you're too skinny. And my parents never said that to me because they knew how healthy I was. I'm at my most active. Even today, my waist will shrink to a size 22 and clothes just aren't made to that size. And
Hmm.
so today I sit before you a little bit unhealthy because I am like, I had to put on a little bit of extra weight on myself. And I do feel a little bit more sluggish because of it. And I do
Hmm.
have to limit myself for how much I put myself in the gym, but I can't control that the way my skeleton is. But if
Hmm.
I was able to be really small, that would probably be my most active and my best self.
Yeah.
So I think like currently I'm struggling with that myself, of like associating health with body shape and just what it looks like visually.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think being in the fashion industry like amplifies that? Like, do you think that it is a supportive environment or a hard
It's
environment to
been,
be in?
I would say it's been a supportive environment, but like I think for a lot of people, what happens is like the clothes are the clothes and you kind of have to fit into the clothes.
Hmm.
And it's not about the clothes being made to fit you. And so I think like if you fit into that size, like awesome. And if you don't, then you don't. And I've been cut many, many times from bookings because like I'm too skinny to fit the clothes. And for other people, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And so what I've learned through that is like every designer kind of makes their own clothing and it fits differently on different bodies. And so there's again never a right answer. Like it wouldn't be better if my chest was a little bit bigger. It wouldn't be better if my butt was a little bit curvier. Like there's no like right or wrong because for some brands, like the clothes I have in my closet, they fit perfectly.
Hmm.
So I know that like every designer's doing something different. And so again, like there's no right or wrong answer. There's no like more optimal body shape. Like what you are in your truest form and your most authentic natural self is ultimately the only thing that's going to be timeless.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting, the idea that the clothing, you have to fit the clothing. And I think, the luxury that we have when we're purchasing clothing as we get to decide what the clothing is. And some designers, it's like, I don't like how that fits on my body. Like, I'm not going
Yeah,
to pick those jeans, right? But for
right.
some people, they're perfect because that's how their body's made and understanding the diversity in that. So that's probably very relieving to know that that doesn't fit. Just like for teens, like there might be certain things that their friends are wearing that just does not look the
They just
greatest
don't
on them.
vibe
They
with.
don't, yeah, it just is not what feels comfortable for them either. And it's
Yeah.
okay to be like, yeah, no.
Yeah, like I don't like that. Like for me, high-waisted jeans like are just isn't comfortable because I have such a short torso. And so like for me, like even when low rise wasn't in, I was still wearing low to mid rise. Because that's just what's most comfortable on my shape. And I so badly wanted to like wear all these cute styles that I saw my friends wearing, but it just wasn't going to work for me.
Yeah, to find your own style. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably the most attractive and the easiest to maintain, right? When it
Yes.
feels good for
Yeah.
you, then
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to get dressed. It's easier to go out into the world because you feel
Feel
good
good.
and you're not trying to fit into maybe that one size or that one look. Yeah. I think, something I wanted to say on this is sometimes I think about the shape and size and parents noticing that. I think it's maybe more focusing on how people feel.
Yes.
And parents asking their kids about like how they're feeling, right? Like it's okay to talk about bodies and it's
Yes.
okay to talk about like their makeup. It's okay to talk about their workouts, their whatever. Like, how does it make you feel? And I
Yes.
think if that makes them feel good, right, and they're feeling positive about that, then we generally support it. Obviously, there can be times where there is like disordered eating or disordered thoughts around certain things, but that's not true happiness, right? So if they are truly feeling happy, then we're not having these disordered thought processes. And so if we go to the gym and we work out for softball practice or whatever, and we feel good and strong with our bodies, then we're going to feel really good. And so as a parent supporting that part, and I think you can also ask, what kind of foods feel good for you to eat, right?
Yeah.
And noticing that, because I think that was a transformative thing for me and my own journey of kind of settling things out, is like noticing that like if I eat white rice, for instance, I
Mhm.
do not feel good after that. Like for me personally, right? Like I feel hungry really
Yeah.
soon after that. And so then it's like I don't really want to eat that because it
Yeah.
doesn't really fill me, and nutritionally white rice isn't super great for us, right? Like, but it is a staple in lots of countries around the world. But for me personally, I just try to avoid that because I don't feel super good. I'd rather have a protein or vegetable or fruit instead. And so then that feels better. And then if I notice after meals, like, how am I feeling about that? And it's like, okay, that felt good. Or actually, I feel kind of sluggish or whatever. And noticing those parts, I think we can have these conversations with our teens and our kids about food, about how we feel versus it being like a good food or a bad food and or like that or anything being like a judgment like, oh, that makeup trend is terrible, right? Or it's good, right? Like, but just noticing, how do you feel? And I think we can notice, like, you look great today, but not only saying your kid looks great when they're all dressed up, like they're wearing, their sweat clothes and you're like, hey, you look beautiful. Like, you're awesome, right? No makeup, no nothing. And to just normalize that, like, we don't have to do anything to be beautiful, that we can just be beautiful exactly the way that we are.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So what advice do you specifically have for teens? So if you could speak to teens right now and give them some advice about beauty, what would you say to them?
I would say that, like, don't limit yourself. Like, just know that, like, your people and like what you resonate with is out there. Like, if you're in a situation right now where everyone's doing one thing and you're not vibing with it, that's okay. Hang on to who you are in your truest form and like really channel into like what it is that you're drawn to. And keep going with that, because beauty is a little bit about like figuring out and refining what you yourself like. And your brain, of course, constantly evolves. We just talked about that. Like, you're constantly changing. In and itself, like, that is beautiful. The fact that you are changing every day. There's something for everyone in this world. And what you have is a gift. Every major fashion designer also has their own vibe. They weren't doing what everyone else was doing. They were drawn to something else. So if you're that kid that just isn't everyone else's, own that. Channel that, because that's really what's going to make you stand out someday and make you really special.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been so enlightening to hear your perspective. And I love this idea of the evolution of our look and thinking about that and being able to talk to our kids about that idea. Thank you so much, Slesha, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again, Slesha. That was really informative. I know that raising teenage daughters to feel good and positive about themselves is really challenging, especially in this world that's ever evolving around beauty. I loved your perspective, and I know lots of parents will take that away too. With that, I'll say have a great day. Thank you so much for showing up. If you like what we're doing, please rate and subscribe to our show. Please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And also keep sending your requests for episode topics to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.